let me go ahead and start moving into the workshop here then. What are we going to try to get out of today? You know, come 4:30 or whatever this afternoon, what is it that I hope you will have gotten out of this? And my big goal is two things, and then I'll give you a little more fine-grained set of expectations here. First thing I want to do is try to convince you. I'm going to do a sales job on you, basically. But I'm going to try to convince you that of the many things you can learn about teaching, and there truly are lots of things you can learn and want to learn as a teacher, that of those several things, learning how to design your course is maybe the single most important thing you can learn about teaching of the set of things. I'm going to, at the front end of the workshop, just for a little while here, we're going to lay out the case for that, and you can draw your conclusions one way or the other. But the second big thing for the bulk of the workshop then is to whatever degree I convince you that learning how to design your course is important, at least somewhat important, then I want to walk you through this model of integrated course design, the name I put on it, a learning-centered view of designing courses, walk you through the various steps of it. Okay, and that's what the self-directed guide laid out, was what those steps are. And there's a certain sequence. You have to, if it's learning-centered, you have to do that at the front end and not at the tail end. So that's the two parts of that. A little more fine-grained version of that. These are some of the things that I think we actually have a pretty good chance of getting this to happen. There are some terms and concepts I just want you to understand. The integration part. Get a lot of comments after the workshop from people when they've been through it. Says, I like this workshop in part because it affirmed the value of much of what I'm already doing. And I suspect that will happen with you. So, but now I know why that's good to be doing that, and I was able to pick up some new ideas to add to what I'm already doing. And that's what I call the integration between some new ideas and what you're already doing, seeing the value of both of those sets of ideas and the interaction between them. Working with others, that's the team group, the small group part of that. You'll see, so I think, some real value in that. Identifying the value of course design within teaching, what is its place and how does it affect the other part of what we do. And then finally, believe me, even though it's an all-day workshop, you're not going to learn everything that there is to learn and a value to learn about course design. Where else can you learn some more things about that if you want to keep on refining your knowledge of that? We'll get to that day. Now, as you look at that set of 6 things, does that look at all familiar? The categories. What is it? The taxonomy. Yeah, the taxonomy of significant learning. What I want you to see, I mean, I really use that even when I do a one-day workshop. So I've got 6 hours. You've got a whole semester, okay? But I wanted to show you, even for a 6-hour workshop, what learning goals for this workshop might look like if you use that taxonomy. Okay, so how are we going to get all that to happen? Well, this is my agenda for the day, where I'm going to start off with that big picture teaching and the place of course design within it. Then I'm going to ask you to do some reflection on your own about your own views, hopes, dreams for teaching. And then we're going to start that process of working through the various steps in it, and you see those laid out there. Now, later this afternoon, about 3:30 or so, second half of the afternoon, there's a couple specific things I just want to bring to your attention about STEM teaching. I want to save about 15-20 minutes near the end of this afternoon to answer a question that I'm reasonably sure you will have at that time, and that is, question, is it worth it? That is, if I do spend that extra time designing my course in the Cadillac version, if you will, is it really likely to make a difference in student engagement, student learning? Okay. Now, what I'll be doing at that time is sharing 1 or 2 cases, depending on how much time we have, but a couple case studies of people who did redesign their courses using ideas, and sharing with you what happened when they did that, and then you can draw your own conclusions as to whether it's worthwhile or not. So that's the agenda. Let's get started here. This whole set of ideas comes out of a major shift that you need to be aware of in higher education. It began maybe 10, 15 years ago, called the learning-centered paradigm in higher education. Some of you may already be familiar with it, but basically the paradigm shift is from taking a teaching view of what we're doing as professional educators to a learning-centered view. Now, the first time I read it, there's a classic article came out about this in 1995. The first time I read that, I didn't get it. I mean, I said, hey, I don't understand what the big deal is. We teach, we hope students learn, both of these have to happen. What's the big deal? But after I thought about it, I finally realized it really does make a huge difference in the way you think about teaching. If I take a teaching view of what I do as an educator. You can work on dividing these up into big groups or small groups or whatever. And just a little side tip, if you need help or you decide you want help figuring out what these main topics for a course are, where do you get help in identifying what those are? Anybody? What can help a teacher define and identify the major topics for any course? Where?
Online.
Online. That's probably where a lot of people go now. More traditionally, where do you find those? Textbook, specifically where in the textbook? Table of contents. Yeah, that's what those chapters are, or sections if they've got them in sections. Those are the major topics for that subject, okay? And if you happen to go to almost any of the major textbooks for world regional geography as a topic, you'll discover that the publishers, probably the writers with the help of the publishers, have done you a really big service. In my case, they just happen to divide world regional geography, the world, up into 15 regions and identify the major topics for any course. Where?
Online.
Online. That's probably where a lot of people go now. More traditionally, where do you find those? Textbook, specifically where in the textbook?
Fundamental task.
Table of contents. Yeah, that's what those chapters are, or sections if they've got them in sections. Those are the major topics for that subject, okay? And if you happen to go to almost any of the major textbooks for world regional geography as a topic, you'll discover that the publishers, probably the writers with the help of the publishers, have done you a really big service. In my case, they just happen to divide world regional geography, the world, up into 15 regions. In 15 weeks, so a region a week. So then, okay, so I lay it out, and I gather a lot of information about each of those topics. I present to students, stop at week 15, give them a test, week 10, give them a test, final exam at the end, and I'm done, right? That is a very common way of designing a course, okay? And if I want to get to the end of the semester and then I say, have I done a good job this year or not? I've only got to ask 2 questions. Did I know a lot about those regions? And did I communicate what I knew in a clear, enthusiastic way? If I can conclude yes, if I can answer yes to both those questions, I can say, I can go to sleep at the end of the night, into the year, and say, I did a pretty good job. I feel good, okay? Teaching view. If you shift to a learning-centered view of what you're doing as a teacher, you cannot yet rest well at the end of the year without asking some additional questions, okay? You have to also ask, did a large percentage of the students learn something, and did they learn something significant or important or valuable? In other words, you've got to go beyond what you did and ask, but what impact did my activities as a teacher have on student learning? Did good student learning happen qualitatively, quantitatively, okay? And if it did it happen because of what I did as a teacher or in spite of me? Both possibilities exist. I've seen the latter, okay? Where students were learning, but they were learning in spite of the teacher, not because of him, okay? Because it was critically important for them to learn it, so they just did. All right? That's a different kind of question you have to ask when you take a learning-centered view. What kind of learning do I want, and did it happen, and did it happen for more than 10% of the students? Did it happen for a significant percentage of the students, okay? So if we want students to have a high-quality learning experience, how do we figure out what that is? Well, here's one way to start to define that, okay? And this is just a little time diagram of what happens. You can put this down at the level of the course or the whole college experience, but what happens during that, by the end of it, and after college, okay? And here's what I think most of us would want to have happen. While they're in our courses, while they're in college, both, we want students to be engaged. They have to be coming to class, first of all, paying attention, spending time out of class doing the homework, the reading, or whatever. In other words, students have to be expending energy doing the work of learning. If that doesn't happen, nothing that we want to happen is going to happen. That's a gotta do, okay? But that's process. We need for that process to result in a good product. And that product, in this case, I think, for the course level, means that by the end of the course, students have learned something that they can look at, and we can look at, and others can look at and say, yes. Anybody who's learned that has learned something significant, important, valuable. We want that. And we want that which they have learned by the end of our course to result in something that after college makes a difference in students' lives and the way they feel about things, the way they think about things, what they do, whatever. Different courses are going to have different kinds of impact, but somehow or other, we want to have a positive, discernible impact value for their life after college. Now, as teachers, we want all of that. How do we get that process started? A clue. I think if we focus on number 2 and start with that, we're going to get all of it to happen. So we make our job focus on number 2, we get the whole thing. Why do I believe that? Because the kind of things that we're going to have to do to get powerful learning to happen by the end of the course are going to require us to find ways to engage students. So this is going to happen if we focus on how to make this happen. And if we get this to happen, by definition, something which is significant is something which adds value. So we're going to get number 3. So if we can get number 2 to happen, we're going to get the whole thing to happen. Now, how do we get number 2 to happen? And this comes to my Fink's view. This is not written in canon law anywhere, but this is Fink's view of teaching. I think as teachers, these are the 4 tools we have. I call them the fundamental tasks of teaching. The premise is this, that everything we do as a teacher is simply a specific variation of one or another of these sets of tasks. They're kind of like big buckets of different things in them that we do as teachers. And it kind of goes like this. First of all, we have to know something about the subject matter we're teaching. In my case, geography. In your case, engineering or math or English or history or whatever these other subjects are. You got to know something. I mean, it's a lot easier to teach somebody geography if you know some geography. Just goes, okay? So we got to do that. The other thing we have to do, though, is make decisions about how the learning experience is going to unfold. What are we going to have them read? Are we going to have them working in small groups or not? We're going to have them do reflective writing. How are we going to assess the student learning? We're going to have them do learning portfolios or anything like that. Whole bunch of decisions we always make, and I'm calling all those decisions collectively the design process. That's what I mean by the design process. The decisions about how we want the learning experience to unfold. Now, these 2, for the most part, happen before the course begins, and that's what I mean by the dotted line here. They spill over a little bit, but by and large, they're a priori. Once the course begins, then the other 2 tasks kick in, and the big one is the one at the top. We interact with students, and we do that in lots of different ways. When I lecture, like I'm doing right now, that's a mode of interaction. I lead a whole class discussion, I set up some small group discussions, I email students back and forth, I meet with them in my office one-on-one. All those different ways that we communicate with students, I'm calling that interacting, okay? And then finally, we just have to manage the course. Basically, that means keeping track of data, keeping track sometimes of things. Who's enrolled a course, who dropped, who took the test, who didn't, who retook it, which score counts, those kind of data things. Now, so my premise is everything we do falls into one or another of those 4 categories of tasks. Now, one belief and a couple observations about those 4 tasks. You know, the belief is, to go back to the student's learning experience, the quality of the student's learning experience is a direct reflection of how well we do those 4 tasks. We do those 4 tasks well, they'll have a good quality learning experience. We don't do them, they won't, okay, or they'll go down anyway. Now, it takes more than just us doing our part, right, for the students to have a good quality learning experience. Who else has to do something? Students, right. And that's true, that has to happen. But whether or not the students are motivated, going back to that engagement, to spend the energy, where they are motivated to spend the energy to do the work of learning, is partly a reflection of them, but also is a reflection of us. And if you ask the students that, they'll tell you that in a flash. The same student in one teacher's class will spend that energy to do the work of learning. That same student in another class won't. So it's not that the student's different, but something that the teacher is doing motivates them here, doesn't motivate them here. Anything we do here poorly will have a negative influence on the quantity and quality of student learning. That's the belief. Observation. We as college teachers, not just the people in this room, but in higher education, are not equally well prepared for each of these 4 tasks. We're better prepared collectively for some of them than for others. Here's my read of it. Knowledge of the subject matter. Most college teachers have sufficient knowledge of their subject matter to teach it well. Whereas here, not true. Okay? Very few, some, but very few college professors have had any professional training in how to design learning experiences for students. Here, we don't have that same level of training, most of us. Interacting with students. When you're a faculty developer, you often get asked by professors to sit in on a class and give feedback. And my think is most professors do that. And that's valuable, all right? What that did not teach me, though, were things like the principle, how to write a good test. I saw courses I liked, I didn't like, but it didn't teach me how to design one, okay? I saw teachers who interacted well with other students, didn't interact with well, even though I'm sure that they had teachers who interacted well. Why did people who had teachers who interacted well still end up not interacting well? It means they didn't learn all that they needed to learn from the teachers they had. All right, interacting with students. When you're a faculty developer, you get to observe lots of teachers. What you see when you observe somebody basically is how they interact. I mean, you see the impact of the decisions, but what you're seeing directly is how they interact. This one, most people do that fine. I've seen a couple that are really messed up on the management to the degree that it is impacting the learning of the students, but very, very rare. So big picture, reasonably good shape, 50-50, and my argument here is not 50-50. Most of us haven't learned how to do that well, despite the fact that we've been in courses where we've had some teachers who argued that doesn't by itself teach us how to recreate a good course on our own. So I think we have some things to learn here, okay? Now, let me take that one step further. Some of the common problems we all face, and these I suspect will look fairly familiar to you. There are times, may not happen a lot here at UDC, but there are times when professors elsewhere, Oklahoma, students just are not quite as interested as we would like them to be. Students don't come totally prepared, not somewhat, but not totally prepared, okay. Now the third one may happen, may not happen, but they learn, at the end of the course, they pass the test. They seem to have learned it. But a teacher in the course that follows that, or after that, says, hey, didn't you teach them about X? And the teacher says, yes, and they passed it. It was on the test, and they passed the test. Well, what happened between passing the test and 1 semester, 2 semesters later? It disappeared, okay? A retention of the learning problem. I'm going to show you 3 possible ways to respond to each of these problems and ask you which one you think would have the biggest impact on solving that problem. Okay, let's take this lack of student interest. Students are coming to class, they're not sure, or they're not coming to class, which is an indication of not interested or whatever, okay? One thing you can do, you can enhance your lecturing skills. Most of us are not naturally born lecturers. There are skills we can learn to help us do that better, okay? Or knowledge of the subject matter. Teacher can go to the latest journals and the latest books and get the latest cutting edge stuff and put it in the course, and maybe if I use really new stuff, it'll be more interesting to students. Possibility. And these can make a difference, okay? Third one, you can redesign the course to replace the lecturing with more active learning. Now, all 3 of these will help increase student interest. I'm convinced of that. But my question to you, of the 3, which one do you think will have the biggest impact in increasing student learning? 1, 2, or 3? Show of fingers. Just show of fingers. I see a lot of 3s, okay? Let's try the other one. Coming to class not prepared. What can we do about that? Course management. Severe penalties. You come into class, you don't have your homework done, I'm giving you an F for the whole 2 weeks. This is not grade school, this is college. Get serious, grow up, big club, right? Okay, we can do that. We can do that. All right? Or you go to the other direction and the teacher-student interaction, you give them a pep talk, right? Come on, students. I didn't want to lecture today. I wanted to lead a discussion. But I can't lead the discussion if you don't do the readings. Come on, gang, do the readings. Now, how many of you have given that pep talk?
Another thing that I've found that has worked well is if I find that no one has read the chapter in the textbook, breaking students into
Groups?
Mm-hmm. breaking students into groups, right. Finding that the biggest motivator for most students is to not look foolish in front of other students.
That can, yep.
So the
yep.
one or, the 3 or 4 that have actually read the textbook now wind up sort of naturally leading the group of 3 or 4,
Right.
and then, give them 5 pages out of that chapter,
Right.
and then present to the class. The
Okay.
ones that didn't read the textbook now feel foolish. The ones that
Yep.
did feel somehow
Yep.
empowered.
Right. Students, a reason to do the readings. Not a club reason, but a reason. All 3 of these could make an impact in getting them to do the readings. Which one is going to get the most students to do the readings? 1, 2, or 3? 3. Third problem, they learn it but don't retain it. What can we do with that? Okay, the other is, one option is a management. You can raise the bar. You don't get an A or B in this class unless you really know your stuff. Okay, you got to know it. Okay, one option. Or this is the only one that's really kind of a tongue-in-cheek. Most people don't do this, but it's an option in some campuses. At Oklahoma, for example, I don't know if you have this, but we have fall semester, spring semester, and summers. And in between each of those terms, we have a 2-week, what we call intersession. You can take a whole course in 2 weeks. Do you have that here? Don't have it. Okay. So imagine you were in a situation where you did. One of the options for a student, for example, who took Chemistry 1 in the fall and is going to take another course in chemistry in the spring and wants to retain it, one of the things that students could do, not real popular, is repeat the course, take it a second time over the Christmas break. If you take it twice, maybe you can remember it from December to January, okay? Not popular, but possible. Or you can redesign the course to give them more experience using what they learn in the beliefs if they use it, they're going to retain it longer than if they read it or even talk about it, but they use it, okay? All 3 can help them retain it from December to January, okay, or one semester another one. Of the 3, which one's going to do the best job of helping them? 1, 2, or 3, okay? That's my experience. It doesn't solve all the problems we face as teachers, but it does solve a lot of them. Because we're 50-50 on our interaction skills. We're not 50-50 on our course design skills. A lot of our problems, the result, come from poorly designed courses. We improve the design of the course goes better in solving some of these problems. Not 100%, but a lot of them. Okay. So that's my argument for why course design is important. It's a central part of what we do. It's something we don't have a lot of training in, and as a result, we're creating problems with poor course design that we can solve if we design our courses better. So that's that argument. So now we're going to start turning the corner and say, okay, how do we design our courses? And I'm going to show you 3 ways, one of which I kind of outlined earlier. I called that the list of topics. Remember when I was talking about the world geography course, North America, South America, and so forth? And basically, what you're doing there is identifying the main topics, gathering a lot of information, and laying that out to students via lectures, the books, or whatever. Okay? A real common way to teach courses. In fact, given the faculty I've seen hundreds of faculty work with them at Oklahoma and elsewhere. I would suspect that somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of all courses are designed that way, especially as beginning college teachers. And that's what I did when I was a beginning teacher. That seemed the most natural way. Find out the topics. That's what the textbook helps me do. Prepare some information, lay it out. Okay. Now, pluses and minuses to all these 3 ways. What's good about this way of designing a course? What's good about it? If you're systematic, careful about it, move through, you'll be comprehensive. I mean, 1 region a week, and we don't dilly-dally just because it's Europe and America. We move right on, and we make sure we get to Australia and Oceania, the last chapter in every book, and one you never get to. Okay, so comprehensive. Anything else good about it? Exactly. Why? That's true. Why?
Well, because if they have a book,
right?
Chapters, they follow it along.
It's media coordinated because that's where it came from. I mean, the table of contents.
Repeat what she says.
Oh yeah, it's because if students can follow it. Because if it's chapter 3, we must be the Middle East. If it's chapter 7, got to be Southeast Asia or whatever. And they can tell that because they follow in the book. So it's easy for the students to follow. They don't get lost in where you are.
Time management.
Time management. You say more.
We have limited.
We have a limited amount of time, and so we just move right through it, and it's kind of systematic about it. Okay, good things. Are there any downsides to this way of designing a course? It's very linear, and here's topic 1, here's topic 2. What's the relationship between topic 1 and 2? We don't get into that. Some people say, okay, maybe we can do better than a list of topics, okay? So they go to what I call the list of activities. And they're especially concerned about the boredom and the students not learning and so forth, so forth. So they say, okay, we're still going to cover the topics, But instead of me lecturing about it, we're going to fight that tendency. And I'm going to make it more active learning. I'm going to put some small group activities in week 2. I'm going to put a simulation in week 4. I'm going to put a case study in week 6. I'm going to, in geography class, we find some money. We're going to take a field trip to Latin America or Asia, week 8 here. We're going to do this upright, okay? So we put some active learning in there. What would you expect would be the positive impact of more active learning in your course if you did that list of activities, case studies, role plays, and all that good stuff? What would be the positive impact you'd expect?
One of the positive things would be to link the real world with the theoretical.
They're going to see a connection between the stuff they're reading and what happens out there. Okay? Good. What else? So they get some experience apart. And what's going to happen as a result of getting experiences? Yeah. Louder. More attention. More interesting. That's exactly right. And if you look at the subtitle of the books that were written about active learning, that's generally the subtitle, how to make your course more engaging and more interesting, because it does that, okay? So this is good stuff. So I would, I believe, like most people, that getting some active learning, what I call a list of activities here, is a big advance and improvement over a list of topics kind of approach. Is there still a downside?
Yes.
What? Who said yes?
I did.
Right here. What's the downside?
Because some of the activities could be mindless.
Okay.
Just activities.
Activities for activity's sake. I got to do something besides me talking. I got to get them talking, but it's not well thought out.
Right.
Okay. What else might be a concern?
Right.
Say more. Yeah, I know I heard the word, but what do you say more about it?
You are going to have a list of activities. Sometimes activities take more time than
Right.
classes.
Right.
And you have to manage everything within the
And then we don't cover the topics, all the important topics. Not only we do cover, they don't learn them. Okay, that's the more important concern. Okay. One other concern that people sometimes feel is that integration thing. Even with the list of activities, if you could teach the course backwards as well as forward. Are we really talking about an integrated course? It's just a bunch of topics, and we could do odd numbers and even numbers. If you can do that, you don't have an integrated course. It doesn't build, okay? Now, if we want to solve some of those problems, my belief is, what we need is a way of designing courses that's one is systematic. What I mean by systematic is there's a series of questions you have to ask when you design the course, and there's a sequence to those. It isn't just a random do something. You got to do one in order to get the answer to that before you do number 2, before you do number 3. Integrated means the dots are connected, and it does build, and the students need to do 1 before they do 2, before they do 3. And finally, like the comment in the back here, it definitely needs to be learning-centered rather than subject-centered or activity-centered or teaching-centered or whatever. The question needs to be, what do we want students to learn from this course? And then get that to happen, okay? And that's my characterization of integrated course design. It is systematic, it's integrated, and it's learning-centered. So what we're going to do now then is start working on learning about this particular way of designing courses, integrated course design. And the first thing we're going to do with that is something that I think you're going to enjoy, because I'm reasonably sure that the reason most of you got into graduate school and got into the profession of college teaching is that you really like taking multiple choice tests, okay? And so that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to give you a moment of joy, pure joy here, okay? We are going to do that, but we're going to do it in a different way with a little twist on it. So I think you'll enjoy it, though, because most people do. What I do need for everybody to do, though, is to move near to one of these yellow cards here, because this is where we're going to first set up our teams. So I want everybody in the back row and the back 3 rows there to come down and sit around these where you've got 4 to 5 people near one of these yellow markers. So just come on down, okay? Because everything we're going to do from here on is going to be 50% of it's going to be done working with peers, okay? All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give each group a folder like this, and here's what you're going to find in here. There's going to be one sheet of paper that has 5 multiple choice questions on it, some in the front, some in the back. They're numbered 1 to 10 because it's a reduced version of a 10-question quiz, but I'll use that on the 2-day workshop. For one day, I'll use this one. And so they'll have 5 questions there. And then you'll find some little answer sheets. They're just like every other answer sheet. These are, again, numbered 1 to 10. So just put the numbers, you put your answer on the number of the question. So like they're numbers 2, 3, 6, and so forth, okay? So just answer these, your individual answers on those. So take the test, answer the 5 questions individually. That's just like any other multiple choice quest. Now here's where it gets different and interesting. When everybody in your group has finished taking the test individually, I want you to take the same test again immediately, but as a group, okay? And you'll do it on this sheet of paper. Each row is a question, each column is a possible answer, okay? And the little cover, the gold there here on the one you're going to get are silver, but the little silver things are just little scratch-off things like a lottery sheet, okay? So what you're going to do is like this. Let's say this group starts out, takes the first question. Some of you answer A, some of you answer B. You have to talk it out. Why did you answer A? Why did you answer B? Well, I think it makes sense. You say, yeah, but I read it and it didn't say that. Okay, whatever. Okay. So finally, you have to figure, okay, we think A is the answer. So somebody needs to be the scratch-off person. Fingernail usually works pretty good. You can use a key or a coin or whatever. But somehow or other, scratch the silver stuff off of the answer you want. Say A. If A is the correct answer, there'll be a star there. If you get the star, you got the correct answer, move on. If you don't get the star, keep scratching until you do, okay? If you don't get the star, that means you did not get the correct answer. Rethink it, re-talk it out until you do. But you want to, if to the degree that you can, talk it out well enough that you get the star on the first scratch. Why? Because you get more points if you do. Okay? Like right here. You're going to see some, like, this is not the pattern, by the way, but you don't need to memorize it real quick, but there'll be stars there or not. But if you get the correct answer on the first scratch, you get full credit for that question, 4 points. If it takes you 2, we'll give you half of that, okay, 2 points. If it takes you 3 scratches, we'll give you half of that, 1 point. If it takes you 4, you really didn't know what you're doing, 0, okay? But we will post the scores afterwards, so the team score, the individual scores, nobody's going to see that, but the team scores will be visible. So try to do your best, all right? And when you get done, so you got the idea? Yep. Okay, let me pass these out. When you finish the team test, add up the points, and then somebody come up here and record the score. What team are you?
11.
11. So yeah, just record it. 16. 16. Just see if you can write that under the 11 there. That's right, 16. Well, first of all, did anybody in your groups have a perfect individual score?
No.
Nobody. Anybody in your group have a perfect score? What was your secrets to success? Arguing. Really talking it through. Translate it out, talk it through very thoroughly. Yeah. What else would you add to that?
We actually pared down and based the 2 most reasonable answers.
So you narrowed it down to 2. And then, but the people who thought had to speak out, the people had to challenge them, and then they had to challenge back, and then go with what you thought was the best answer.
Alternate answers, so
yeah.
We said we'll try this, and if it's not this, it's
Then we, if not A, then we're pretty sure it ought to be B. But you got the A right first time in each case.
The key to the success was being able to reason through the problem.
Yeah, yeah. 2 questions here for everybody. First of all, how many people enjoyed that process? The individual first followed by the group test, okay? So students often have the same reaction, but now how many of you felt that in the group discussion, your understanding of the course design issues got better? That most of people see that they enhanced your understanding of things. But if you set the small group process up in the right way, where it has a real focus like that, if you have students that have different backgrounds, that turns out to be an asset if they learn how to dialogue and talk it through.